Hi guys, Mr. Davis here, reading the last couple of sections of George versus George. This section is called The Final Battle. Leaders on both sides began to think the war could finally be won with a major victory in the South. Up north in New York, George Washington got wind that British General Charles Lord Cornwallis and his men were marching towards the Virginia tobacco port city of Yorktown on the Chesapeake Bay, brutally terrorizing area residents as they went. In 1781, Cornwallis finished setting up his base of operations. Washington had just learned the French were sending 28 ships to help the American forces. Would it be possible to set a trap for Cornwallis? The timing would have to be absolutely perfect. First, Washington's men joined forces with an army of French ground troops in New York. Then both armies sneaked past the Northern Redcoats and raced night and day for 500 miles all the way south toward Yorktown. Meanwhile, the 28 French ships sailed into the mouth of the long Chesapeake Bay. This news was sent by courier to George Washington, whose men had just reached the top of the bay. Famous for being calm and dignified, Washington was so excited that he jumped up and down and waved his hat with glee. The trap could now be set. But before long, cannon fire boomed across the water. Great Britain's navy had arrived too and was fighting the French. Just in time, the French ships whipped Great Britain's navy and sent them packing. Now Cornwallis couldn't escape by water. By early October, Washington's troops and the French army and navy had joined to surround him. Cornwallis was outnumbered 2-1, but he hadn't given up hope. He had sent word to the British generals up in New York, pleading for help, and he expected it to arrive at any moment. Not a chance. Commander-in-Chief Sir Henry Clinton kept making excuses not to fight. Besides, he was too busy entertaining a visitor, King George's young son, Prince William, who thought he might like to become the royal governor of Virginia. By October 17th, 3 weeks after Washington set the trap, Cornwallis's forces were starving. Unburied bodies lay everywhere. The ground was shaking violently from the thunder of 100 cannons, and the sky was streaked with red from shots flying across enemy lines. All of a sudden, British officers appeared through the smoke, waving a white handkerchief to signal defeat. Though the smoke, waving a white handkerchief, joyous American forces started to let out a tremendous cheer, but George Washington silenced his men, shouting, "Let history huzzah for you." Claiming he was sick, General Cornwallis snubbed George Washington by sending his second-in-command to surrender his sword to a French commander who fought alongside the Americans. The Frenchman turned the British officer away by pointing towards General Washington, the real commanding officer. Washington pointed Cornwallis's second-in-command towards his own second-in-command, and when the British sword was at last surrendered, the Revolutionary War was officially over. Next section is called No Kings for America, which is page 52. King George tried hard to continue the struggle, but British support faded fast. The king was so humiliated that he almost gave up his crown. It took several years for his attitude to change. Quote from King George says, "Till driven to the wall, I certainly will do what I can to save the empire, and if I do not succeed, I will be a tool in the destruction of the honor of the country." George Washington was encouraged by an officer in his army to become the King of America. He was horrified. Quote from George Washington, "If you have any regard for your country, concern for yourself or posterity, or respect for me, banish these thoughts from your mind." It took 2 years of meetings to plan for peace. In Paris, France, on September 3rd, 1783, England finally signed a peace treaty with France and Spain that also included total independence and a vast amount of land for America. At long last, it was official. King George and Great Britain had lost the 13 colonies forever, and the United States of America had been born.